Welcome back to my channel once again. Today we are going to cut a Bubu dress with puff sleeve. If this is what you are actually looking for, please stay tuned through to the end of this video. The first thing I did was to get the full gown measurements. The full gown is 53 inches. So I measured 53 inches and mark it there. So after marking it, the next thing I will measure is the knee length. The knee length is 33 inches. I'll mark 33 inches on both sides of the fabric because this fabric is wide. So I'll need to mark it on both sides so that I can connect the points together with my straight line. So next I'll get my neck measurements. I'm using the neck width of 3 inches and the neck depth of 1 inch for the back and 3 inches for the front. Now remember that this material I folded it into two. The shoulder will not have any joining, so I just folded this material into two. So that is why I'm cutting the back neckline together. I'll cut the front neckline later. You are going to see how I'll cut it. So having gotten the front and back neckline, I'll get my shoulder measurement. My shoulder is 16 inches. 16 divided by 2 is 8 inches. Then from there I measure my sleeve length. Because this is a puff sleeve, I'm using 25 inches as the sleeve length. Then for the sleeve opening, I'm using 15 inches. I'll mark it from there. Then from the shoulder also, I'll get the hip measurements. I'll mark and connect it to. So just the way I did with the knee measurement, I'll also measure the hip measurement of both sides and connect the lines like so. So from that sleeve opening, I already extend the lines toward the front so that I can measure it. I'm using my hip measurement for that. I will measure my hip measurement divided by 4 plus 3 inches allowance. On the hip line, I also use the same thing, hip measurement divided by 4 plus 3 inches, and I'll connect the points together. You can also use 4 inch or 5 inch if you want the bubu to be very big, but me, I want it to be moderate. I don't want it to be too big. Then from that hip measurement, I'll come out by 3 inches. Also at the knee length, I'll measure my hip measurements divided by 4 plus 3 inches, and I'm going to connect it with my curve rule to the hip length. So that 3 inches I added at the hip line, I'll connect it together. Then from the sleeve opening, I'm coming in by 5 inches. From there, I'm going to connect it straight to that 3 inches I added to the hip measurement. I connect it like so. Now I'll straighten it so that it will have a slight curve like this. So the next thing I will do is to take the same hip measurement divided by 4 plus 3 inches all the way down to the gown length, and then I'll connect everything together. So if you notice at that knee length, it has a pointed shape, so I'm going to remove it by shaping it a little with a slight curve. So the next thing I'll do is to cut it out like so. So our bubu is almost ready. The next thing I'm going to do is to cut the facing. And to cut the facing, I'm going to separate the back from the front. Remember, I've not cut the front neckline, I only cut the back neckline. So I'm going to place the material this way and then cut out the front neckline. Then after cutting out the front neckline, I'm going to cut the facing out. I want the front to have opening. So from that 3 inches I came down with, I also measured 4 inches. But I'm not going to cut it out yet. I'll slit it when I'm sewing the material. So I only cut out the front neckline. So after cutting out the front neckline, I'll place it this way very well to cut out the facing. So to cut out the facing, I am going to place the material I will use for the facing exactly the same way the main fabric is, just this way, the way you see I'm folding it now. So after placing it very well to make sure that there is no one that is bigger than the other, I will use my chalk to mark 3.5 inches on both front and back, and then I will draw out the neckline like so and then cut it out. This is for both front and back. Now I'm going to measure from the 3.5 inches. I'll also measure 4 inches for the slits at the front side. Then from that 4 inches, I'm going to measure 3.5 inches. From the 4 inches also, I'll come in by 2.5 inches, and then I'll go around by 3.5 inches all the way around to meet the back neckline. I'll connect those lines together like so and cut them out. So this is the neckline. I'm going to post a video on how to sew this bubu gown. Until then, thanks for watching.